Well, guess who's back? Good morning, and
Guess
good
who's back?
afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is you ingratiate us and entertain us by participating in what we think is going to be an incredible show. I'm joined this morning by the Dr. Charles Alexander and attorney extraordinaire Jerry L.T. Christmas. That's Kwame Gerald T. Christmas to you. And I'm
Born on Saturday, Kwame.
Going on Saturday, Kwame, just like in Nkrumah. And your frat brother, that is, ironically.
Yes, sir, it is.
Um, and I'm attorney Larry Fields, and we're going to talk about a couple of subjects this morning. There's an incident that occurred at the AUC, that is the Atlanta University Center, that houses Morehouse, Spelman, Clark University, Morris Brown, and the Theological Center as well, and the Morehouse Medical School to boot. And there was an incident that involved, from what my understanding is, a Morehouse student and two females, and there got to be some sort of domestic dispute. And we want to spend some time this morning addressing the macro issues that are related to those scenarios. And we suffer an embarrassment of riches by having not only a clinical psychologist, but one that works on the campus of Morehouse College in the regular roster. And that is the Dr. Charles Alexander, who works with students at Morehouse and who's, like myself, a proud alum of Morehouse as well. So, Dr. Alexander, as we deal with that, and I mean, I'm being redundant. I don't think that they're anything other than proud alums of Morehouse. So, forgive me. But, but Dr. Alexander, I want to open this, issue up to you and Gerald. I want you to get in as soon as possible because this is an issue that we talk about a lot, and this is an issue in which I would imagine you have defended individuals that have been wrongly accused of domestic violence and those that you've had to mitigate circumstances for. And we want to make note of the wonderful sweatshirt that you're wearing this morning. That is, if you uncross your arms, people can see the Thurgood Marshall School of Law, which is
Yes.
well esteemed institutions in this country as well. So, Dr. Alexander, please.
So, as Attorney Fields was stating, I suppose that, well, I'm, I'm, I'm not as well versed on the specifics of this circumstance as I haven't been on campus for about a month because I had a medical procedure. So I've been working virtually. But it appears that within the past, week or so, that there was an altercation that involved a young man from Morehouse, at least one young lady from Clark. And in this case, I'm going to describe her as the victim, um, and the young man from Morehouse as the aggressor. I'm not sure. There's a third young lady that's involved in the situation. I'm not sure, uh, if she's a student at all, or if she is, which institution that she attends, whether that be the AUC or otherwise, one of the AUC affiliates or otherwise. But um, what I'm gathering is that there was an altercation between the young lady from Clark and the other young lady, and the other young lady is attached to the young man who attends Morehouse, and um, it it appears that he initially got involved in order to separate them, and then that evolved into a conflict between he and the young lady from Clark, and in which he became aggressive, and reports are that he began to try to choke her, and that he then, at some point, I don't know if it's in the act or while they were being separated, that he began to make threats about, further and more extreme uh, levels or forms of harm to the young lady at Clark. And so um, I have not received any information relative to this, and in my official capacity as attorney, Fields is noting, I am a part of the Counseling Resource Center on the campus of Morehouse College. Um, so I don't have all, as I said, I don't have all of the specifics. What I'm giving right
Please
now is
enter
kind of
the
an
extension that
undergarment
you wish to
from the world
intercom, followed by
of
pound.
social media and from the range of Morehouse and Spelman and other Atlanta University Center social media posts and conversations. But all in all, my concern in this piece is one that I've actually had for several years now, um, and I think that well, I believe that we're in this dangerous space um, that's just kind of predicated on how we are perceiving violence. And um, and for me, I think it ranges from um, community violence to I mean, it could range from individual violence to interpersonal violence to or intimate partner violence, excuse me, individual violence to intimate personal violence to community violence. Okay, and I think another thing um, that I would like to add to to this conversation is also, not sure if you gentlemen, saw what made national news, which is a Chicago issue, is that it was an elementary school student who was being bullied. His mother made multiple reports to the school about the targeting of her son and her efforts to try to provide some safety and security to her son. I believe she went to pick him up from school, and as they were leaving, the same group of kids who have been targeting her son then attacked her son, and her daughter. Right. And so that's why I want to make sure that we frame this conversation into like this this continuum of um, violence and harm that we're seeing. Um, and and one of the things is that I believe that we have um, there's a degree to which we become desensitized to what we're seeing and what we're experiencing, and and then I think separately from the desensitization, I think there's a normalizing of some of this stuff, and in that we kind of believe it to be what is, and this is what you know this way of relating is kind of foundational, fundamental to our sense of self and then our interpersonal relationships. I'm concerned that that is a space in which we are existing.
And yeah, there is way too much to unpack in a month of shows. But as we listen to that, Attorney Christmas. What are your thoughts?
I think he's absolutely right. Violence in our community has definitely been normalized. There's no doubt about it, and we have too much of it occurring in our community, and it's promoted to our children on so many different levels. And the biggest problem I see is our lack of pushback. We are complicit in the level of violence that is being propagated to our people. And we have got to take a stance on it. And especially when we talk about in these domestic relationships and with the whole idea of putting your hands on women. And we really got to make our men understand and our women understand because oftentimes, I've seen situations where the woman has been the aggressor, but the man has not been able to calm himself down and remove himself from the situation. And when he becomes aggressive because of his strength, it becomes a whole different outcome, which makes me believe possibly what could have happened in the situation uh, at Morehouse that Dr. Alexander was just talking about. Because when you get upset and your emotions get out of hand, and you know as well as I do, Larry, if you start choking somebody, it becomes very problematic. Very problematic, regardless of who started it or what actually happened. But when you get to that point where you starting to inflict serious physical injury, it's problematic. And we have to work on our people at a very young age, very young age. When you talk about the school children, about anger management and how to handle that, and discipline is off the chain. If you go into the elementary schools and the middle schools, right here in our own community in University City, is very problematic. And it's very problematic because of the way the children are being raised, because the parents now have been subjected to this. So, and most often, not only the parents, but the grandparents. That's how deep we are into this now. And so we really have to have a campaign. We have to have a campaign going right now about us loving each other and not committing the level of violence that we're committing towards each other.
And we have
And
to do a better
attorney,
job of not trying to mimic an American relationship model. Our women, in my opinion, are unparalleled to any other class of women throughout the world. So their level of competency, their level of education, is, on par with anyone's, including yours, being on top, in my opinion, as black men, we're at the top of the totem pole. But our women are right there equal. So the issue to me is um, whether or not you think you can control someone by virtue of you being in a domestic relationship with them. That, I mean, and if you have to think, I mean, if you think that you can only lead by brute force, that's the wrong relationship with you. I mean, it's not. I mean, if you think you're supposed to be the leader in a relationship and this person's not following you, guess what? These are at will relationships. You can leave, even if you're married. We've got a mechanism called divorce to get out of it. There's a fool that killed a woman he was dating at 62 years old because she broke up with him. I mean, you cannot own a human. And we need to
but
understand.
I think that's part of the issue there. I We don't perceive any of this as at will. We have too many people. So like if you talk to a person, y'all a thing. And so we've talked. So now it's us. And and so we have this extremism. Too many of us have this extremism. And so I mean, and it's like we have to look at this thing at some at for it's layered, and so we got to look at this for X number of people as starting as a fundamental attachment issue that literally started at birth, right? And so,
Let's stay there. Let's stay on attachment because
mhm,
that's a different issue than trying to control someone. So what
well,
happens
yeah,
in
and
that
so
scenario?
it's and so I mean, just so what is supposed to be happening, right, is that from conception that there is a bonding that is occurring between the infant and the mother, right? So for that whole period of time, and to the degree that there is an attachment between the mother and the father, then the father can participate in the bonding that can occur in that gestational period as well. So that then when that little person emerges, the little person emerges into an attachment or a secure, what is called a secure attachment between, those two adults or those two people who are responsible for, the pregnancy and then ultimately the birth. And so, and all that, again, all of that assumes, a healthy, physically and emotionally and mentally healthy 9 month gestation. Um, because when there's too much stress during that period of time, all of that accrues to the developing child, and and those things start to impact the nature of that relationship again, the nature of that attachment between the child and the mother, the host parent, and if that stuff has not been good when that child comes out, then that child is vulnerable to you know a series of poor attachments thereafter
Let me
if
ask you
there
this,
was
Doc.
not already a solid and firm attachment
Attachment.
awaiting him or her.
There appears to be a generation of young males that do not succumb to blackmail authority. What does that, it does it, is there uh, a relationship to attachment and that?
Yes, and I think that's generations. This is a generational thing, and I don't think that this aspect of this. I mean, there's really none of this that I think is necessarily new. I think again, as with other things, we're in the current iteration. This is kind of what it looks like now. But um, you know, for us, the fundamental destabilizing thing for us is white supremacy. And
And
so and so if this is what our social life is kind of constrained by, it triggers a defense mechanism. And whereas that defense mechanism is intended to do just that, to defend and protect us, so that we can sustain and blah 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 blah. If it don't ever turn off, it shifts from a protective factor to a risk factor, because
explain that, Doc. And I mean, I'm glad you brought up and Gerald, I want you to hop in there at your earliest opportunity. The political social issues that are affiliated with all of these things, and the underbelly of this all continue to be the same foundational dysfunction that's creating this disorientation that you've described, is white supremacy. And we continue to almost, and I'm not going to say blame the victim, but not level that relationship. Those are things that have to be considered when we look at these things. If a white person goes and shoots up a school tomorrow, we are going to have a full background on them by tomorrow afternoon, and the things that were related to their background and why they did what they did. We don't do that. We view our aberrant behavior as the soul of these individuals without the proper context. So, and I don't think we can ever address anger correctly without addressing the context in which anger comes from in this specific instance, because anger is merely a secondary emotion. It's not a primary emotion.
I would disagree with that, Larry. The problem is that, as you indicated with white supremacy, we're not looked at as a whole person in that way. And so we've never, or we really, I won't say never, but I would say in this era, we've really tuned into the whole mental health aspect and getting a better understanding and counseling and help with understanding those issues. But prior to the situation that we're in now, with the awakening of the need for mental health, we just didn't deal with it. And
But mental health is, I mean, even I don't think you can separate the mental health treatise and the things that we're dealing with in mental health from the political social climate that we're in. Those are
no,
all,
I don't disagree. You
yeah.
can't separate them. I'm
Oh,
just saying we were not looking at ourselves that way. And of course, our oppressors were not looking at us that way.
that is
We're looking at ourselves differently now. And that's why we are, we have not quite fully arrived. But that's why you see the uprising or the rebellion in us now with this system and the more willingness to attack the system here lately. Ultimately, I think Dr. Alexander is correct with the whole attachment issue. And I think that you are correct with young men not wanting to take black male authority, primarily because they haven't been in a household with any type of black male authority. And that's what's been real problematic in our communities. And even when it's not even the father, there has not been a uncle or a coach or a neighbor or a grandfather or anybody else to step in. They haven't had any contact. And that's where it's become problematic. And we're going to have to engage more because ultimately you are going to have to be a father to more than just your biological children if we're going to ever get out of this. And so it requires all of us at all times to be that type of role model or have that type of influence on these young men to help them better understand these situations that they come across because they don't have any help in understanding them. And the criminal justice system is not going to do that at all.
hmm.
And and so again, so like we have, and so the thing it continues to morph because
Exactly.
what changes over time, you know, is the nature of the propaganda and the tools that the propagandists use in order to to spread and perpetuate, you know, the um, you know, the desired effect. Um, and one thing I want us to kind of go back and add, and then you know, and this is something I've been you know really pondering literally for years. Um, and even in this conversation, I am this is my current iteration of this recurring thought. And um that we even believe that we have not valued mental health is also a function of the propaganda. Um, and that, because what has occurred, what ultimately has occurred is that we're at a point now where we have what I would consider like an arbitrary idea of what well-being is, and then there's trauma. And so the majority of our mental health, like in just in common parlance, and this is just me as a clinician having conversations with both people and systems. And so when I say so individuals and school systems and agencies and blah 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 blah, that there is nothing between whatever it is we presume to be uh, health and well-being and trauma, right? And to me, in the way of service delivery, right? And so there's this belief that you just come into this thing good and you remain that until something traumatic happens and then you're traumatized. And so now we need to act at that point, right? And so we more or less believe that thing. And so now, I'm sure both of you are aware. I mean, we've heard, they traumatize every you remember when PTSD became this thing and everybody got PTSD, all the kids they got and when that conversation started, I'm sure like in St. Louis, that conversation wasn't for all of the black kids in the St. Louis metropolitan area. It was probably for the kids on the north side, right? You know, they got PTSD. Nobody, no other black kid in St. Louis had mental health issues. Only the kids who lived in whatever we described as high crime and high violence areas,
Hmm.
right? Same
The
thing
kids
here,
in St.
south
Louis
side,
public
west side.
schools.
Yes, 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 yes. And so everybody else is assumed to be healthy, right? But that's this disconnect that we have going all the way back to the conversation about attachment. So let's bring in another layer to this thing. So if maternal and infant if prenatal care is like the worst for black women, right? And clearly only people that probably have worse are the indigenous people of this space.
And
You
and
know,
and you can't mention that without mentioning those national stories that occurred too this week. One sister yelling for assistance while she was in labor, and the white
that was
clinician.
here. That was in Crown Point, Indiana.
It was in Crown.
So
Well, there were two. That those were the one in Crown Point were turned away, and had
they
to
were
put
turned
in the
away.
car.
Yeah. Hmm.
There was another sister that the white nurse just sat there essentially looking at her like she was crazy. Did not, I mean, and the moaning that this woman, it's very difficult to even watch if you have a modicum of humanity to watch someone suffer so visibly. And and then in Crown Point, to add to an earlier conversation that we had, there was a black administrator that came out and apologized. He may have been the president of that hospital that apologized. And I mean, it's just, yeah, these sort of things don't just show up all of a sudden. That's baked in.
That is a systemic issue. It is baked in. And so if that is the nature of the care that black women are receiving, you know, during um uh during
Gestation.
that prenatal, yeah,
Yeah.
during the gestation, all of that is trauma for the mother, and for the infant. All of that is impacting that infant that whole time. If you saw the little baby that was born to the mother in Christ, oh, she's beautiful. Oh, and she's resting peacefully. And somebody's like, oh, look at the little baby. When my wife and I was watching, she said, oh, look at the little, she's beautiful. She's traumatized. But ain't nobody thinking that today, right? Because that's not how we conceptualize this thing, right? And so think about the child who was conceived in the 2 months prior to the election of Donald Trump, whose parents work for the federal government. That child is, I'm not going to be surprised. I'm not going to be surprised of whatever we might see in the next 3 to 5. So we talk about crack babies, right? So there was a crack epidemic, and that influenced the birth of all these kids. But what about all these kids that are about to be born, who were conceived and born within the context of the slashing of, what undergirds the establishment of middle class Black life?
Or
College and federal jobs.
one other example of that, Dr. Alexander, is right now at the elementary school level, we're seeing the results of the children that were born during COVID and
Yes,
the
yes.
trauma that they received. So you see these children now coming in kindergarten and first grade with issues. And I think it directly correlates to what you're talking about because they were born during COVID and they just now are at age to go to school.
In the midst of all of these things, right? And so again, we're not we're not really contemplating, so we're not contemplating the impact, the mental and emotional impact of what we know to be the case. So we know that Black women have poor, and this is regardless of educational and economic status that we have. We get poor prenatal care, and um, we have insufferable outcomes. We have, high maternal death rates and high low birth rates and high infant death rates. That's what we have. But we only contemplate this thing at that high end. So what is the quality of life and what is the sequelae for the ones that don't die? We only contemplate the worst end of it. We don't look at this as a continuum that impacts, well-being, going forward. And so if all of this stuff is happening all the time, and then we come out into a system, we're literally birthed into a system that doesn't have anything that really meets us at the point of a conscious attachment that helps us to learn how to actually attach and grow and nurture and build relationships. Like there's nothing that actually teaches us. There's not a socialization process because we believe that it just happens. And so like when you've been in these places where you're having a conversation about what has occurred, or you happen to be watching the news and something occurred. Well, where the parents at? And we just assume that people know how to parent because we don't have these formalized pieces. Because this too is what's secondary to the perpetual onslaught of white supremacy that destroys, our fundamental sense of community, which starts with how you establish and build families.
And who benefits from all of this dysfunction?
The enemy, right? And so now, and when I say the enemy, you know, of course, all white supremacists are the enemy, but really this thing is run by that, that top, you know, 5 to 10, you know, that 1 to 10%. And they create all of these things because they yield all of the profits of all of these things.
And let's talk
Where
about
we
those
err,
profit centers, the prisons, the hospitals, the white defense bar, in insurance companies to a great degree, so they can charge higher in certain zip codes that they're not, that they're going to deny coverage in. There are a litany of individuals and the fear. So the gun lobbies. And so if I can convince you that the criminal aspect and the criminal behavior and the dysfunction of black folks is innate and not a result of the contextual underfunding of schools, the callous healthcare system, the um, the underpopulated Dr. Alexanders of the world. If I never mention that, I can do exactly what I want to do. And I'm going to fund that, and I'm going to perpetuate that in Hollywood. I challenge you to find a three-dimensional black male character on any TV show. I've challenged today, this week. I challenge you to find a happy household with a black and a black wife and a black husband with children that have just common everyday problems this week. And so all of these things are perpetual. And on top of that, we've given very little attention to the expectation that the entertainment industry has created for our men. The expectation,
that's the propaganda.
that's the propaganda. Killers. I saw a clip of a guy in that was being interviewed by police, and he was talking about the murders that he had committed since being out of jail since, over the last 8 months, and why he committed those murders. He was a poster child for any, for a garden variety rap right now. And I'm a hip hop head, always have been since its inception. But this guy says, he wanted the bling that people had. These guys, I mean, if I catch you in a car with, with these fancy rims on it, it made me, it gave me an erection. And so they said, well, why would you kill them? Well, I'd kill them if they wouldn't comply. If they don't comply, I kill them because, I mean, you got to comply. He said, if I had that tech that, he pointed to the tech that they had taken from him. If I had that tech and a 45 and I got them pointed down to the ground and somebody comes behind me with a gun to my head, I'm going to comply. So, and I mean, it was just the most chilling thing but it was, a realization of what, and the question is, I have the same question. Who benefits from that? The same individuals that we previously named.
And so again, and so when we look at those circumstances, and this is another part of the piece, is that those of us who not living in, we don't believe we're living in that life. We ain't living in that space. We ain't about that life. You know, we assume that to be, we assume that to be some innate, hostile, violent, materialistic, you know, you know, characteristic or or personality of this person. We don't look at the perpetual downward pressure placed upon us by the system as violence. And so we don't see our behavior, our ex we don't see our behavior as externalizing behavior. And so externalizing behavior in the clinical sense is acting out, right? Internalizing behavior would be like depression, right? So if I'm having an angry outburst, that's externalizing behavior. If I'm doing self-harm or if I'm withdrawing and I'm not talking to people, I'm depressed, that's internalizing behavior. And so we might look if we even recognize that internalizing behavior exists, we are likely to try to come up with a cause or some kind of cause, some kind of precipitating event and a point of onset. Externalizing behavior, we just be like, that's how he is. And we start to internalize the racist stereotypes that are perpetuated.
Wee,
Right.
you cooking, boy. You hear? Are you listening to this man, Gerald?
I'm listening.
This man is cooking, boy.
Those become kind of like the standards, and so and so for the young brothers, it's the aggressive behavior now, and so for the sister, that propaganda that again is this thing, it ends up getting matched. The the attachment issues that can occur just literally because of the luck of the draw, or the lack of love thereof, is then paired with a similar stereotypical archetype that sisters grow into, right? So sisters grow into sapphire, right? So
For
and
those
so
of you all who don't know
we
who
have
Sapphire is, she was the wife of Andy and the Amos and Andy old movies. Go ahead, Doc.
and so she's fiery, she's sharp, she talks crazy, all that kind of stuff, and blah 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 blah. She ain't gonna be talked to any kind of way, and she gonna talk to you any kind of way. Well, we have whole so like in terms of media presentation, we have um entire franchises predicated on these chaotic relationships between women. And it's not just black women. You got housewives or whatever for every color. You got
Every
housewives or
demographic now.
whatever. Yeah, for all and so this is kind of like this whole piece, and so it's teaching a way of communicating amongst each other, where talking crazy to each other is fundamental to our relationship. Because girl, I love you. I only talk crazy to you because you my bitch. Now, we have a whole conversation about black men and rap music using bitch. Women use it all the time. And so it's the same chaos. And so if it's chaos, then it's chaos. Let's not make it gendered chaos.
And it's chaos across the board
It's
because
chaos across the board.
it's across the board. And when you talk about the use of the word bitch, we cannot, we just ultimately, it seems, cannot stop calling ourselves niggas, bitches, and hoes. And as long as we're gonna fundamentally do that on a continuous basis, to me it appears it'll be very difficult to come out of that. And it happens at so many levels. I know federal judges that you can't stop from calling folks niggas, let alone somebody right at the street level. You understand what I'm saying? Because these are
Yes.
individuals that
Yeah.
are highly educated, that know better, that in different surroundings would never use or act as if they would never use those words, but they use them on a regular basis. And it's been so normalized with us to defame ourselves, I think is highly problematic and leads to a lot of this behavior.
But part of the issue with that, attorney, is again the separation from the language. Like we separate the use of the language from, at a conceptual level, we separate that from any sense of mental health and well-being.
Hmm.
We keep thinking that this is just what people do. We
Right.
don't think about it in terms of that continuum from, being born and nurtured within this healthy attachment in this structured situation that teaches us how to love ourselves and those people who love us.
And it was
And
not
so,
as popularized when I was growing up as it is now.
well, it was different.
I'm very well aware that the words were being used, but in just a public context, the way that it's used now is a lot different
I
It's
can't
than
used
what
remember
it
it being.
was then. Because I just think about when we talk about the lapse of male figures. I always remember everybody in the neighborhood when we were growing up had a male figure in the household. I have to think hard to think about who did not have a male figure present. Even if they didn't have a father, they had an uncle or a neighbor or somebody was more present. Mainly, primarily because I'm thinking we all lived in the same community too. That's one of the differences. Uh, we were all together. I think, integration has caused a lot of these issues because we get out away from our community and that causes
we make
problems for us.
choices.
We make
We make
choices.
choices.
We make choices.
And so some of us make choices. And again, even our recollection of when we grew up is skewed. Your recollection of what was going on for the black community as a child is really predicated on how you were raised, not what was going on in the black community. Your
I think
your
it's
your
more of a
recollection is
it's
predicated.
not a combination of both.
Your recollection is based on literally your community. It ain't based
Mhm.
on whatever was going on. Like it ain't based on what was going on in Laclede Town.
Correct.
So Laclede Town might have looked like you know what we said now. Definitely by the time you was getting ready to graduate from high school, Laclede Town was probably looking like a lot of whatever it is that now when you was born, Laclede Town, I'm sure or any other of the public housing in St. Louis was probably you know more intact in terms of the social structures. But by the early to mid '80s, all of that stuff was a shambles, right? And so that's. But what happens is we don't process it that way. We process it as there's something wrong with those people.
Well, the thing about it too, though, is our baseline for humanity is different, and I don't think we can grasp. Yeah, you've mentioned this before when you were talking about the Panthers, and I'll use them as an example that you've mentioned before, that they had no idea what they were up against. And I
Right.
think that we are just as um,
Naive.
I don't think that's the word because your baseline, your humanitarian baseline, I think is there for a reason. But I don't think that we have the ability to be as diabolical as those that have waged war on us, so we can't even understand it. And the game is played at such a high level that it's not in your face, and it's played on multiple fronts. It's consistent. It is very, very consistent. And so let's move to what kind of solutions we can have in that. What we can do to foment our well-being, not just to make it, but to thrive. What do we need to be doing?
Hey, we have to deconstruct these things so that when we get to the point of this young man is choking this sister at the thing, like, how did we get to that? There's a narrative that that precedes whatever happened that day, right? So he gonna take the brunt of this because he put his hands on that sister. Why was them sisters fighting? You know what I mean? That ain't even part of the conversation right now. Because that's probably okay because nobody was getting choked. My point is that it was already a bad situation. And we ain't got to this point where we accept those bad situations. Like, so even if we're sensitive to, and this is in relational spaces, and this kind of gets to, Larry, you referencing the situation where the 62-year-old guy went and killed a woman. So even to the degree that, jokers would be like, men shouldn't hit women. Nobody's really talking about the way that people just talk crazy to each other, right? Nobody, and so our
Doc,
social discourse
Doc, can I ask
may.
you, right
Mhm.
there, is it possible to have words that are violent?
Yes,
And so
words, actions, all of that. Yes.
can we do, let's commit to do to talk about three things. What is violence? What are those external issues you talked about? Um, that we act out as a result of these contextual, social, and psychological issues. And what are the internal ones? Because I think if we can identify those things, we can begin to address them. We don't have to do them today, but I think that we need to do that in order for us to thrive.
So fundamentally, like, this part ain't gonna never change. Fundamentally, we have to accept that white supremacy is a thing that has adverse impact. Otherwise, we wouldn't have disparity. Primarily, we wouldn't have health disparity. And even when we talk about health disparities, which we still don't talk about enough, we only think about them in the context of, we think about it in the context of diabetes and heart disease. You know, we're starting to think about it more in the context of cancer. Every so often, you hear people talk about, asthma as a reflection of health disparity. At least with asthma, a lot of times it's more likely that you're going to hear people, um, like, you might hear people talk more about um, um, environmental violence when you talk about asthma, even a little more so than you might hear folks talk about um, the impact of food deserts on hypertension and diabetes,
Let
right?
alone this radiation. We got radiation litigation right now.
And so all of these things are violent, right? And these are things that are, that are caused and created by this system. And Gerald, like when you were talking about, it was different when we were growing up. Well, this is what deregulation looks like. Like when we hear all of these conversations and we hear all of the stuff that the Republicans talk about deregulation, we never think about what these steady implications are, right? And so deregulation means that you have toxic environments that Black people disproportionately live in, Black and brown folks. We have, you know, uh, food deserts, we have pharmacy deserts, we have hospital deserts, we got, all we got where Black folks and brown folks live are, um, you know, um, paramilitary forces watching our every move. That's the only thing that they can seem to get into those places. They can't get public transportation into those places. They can't get nothing in those places. The only thing they can get into those places are police who think that the people that they're there to serve are actually the enemy.
Or
All of
innate,
that is
or,
violence.
as the fool says in The Godfather, they don't have,
They don't have
animals,
souls.
they don't have souls.
Mhm.
And so we start to believe that stuff. We start to
We do believe it.
internalize.
We past starting to
Yes,
believe it. We
yes.
believe so much of the
We
negativity about
believe that
ourselves.
stuff. Yes. And so, but it's all a part of the propaganda. And so we underestimate, the import of self-knowledge and self-love, and we think it's just something that nationalists say and blah, 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 blah. It is fundamental to the way that you take care of yourself. And so if you believe that, if you value yourself, you go take care of yourself. If you really believe that this is a temple, then you take care of it as a temple, right? Um and so we we fundamentally have to look at this thing as a thing that perpetuates violence. And so we live in a violent society. It's not North St. Louis, right? It's not the South Side or the West Side of Chicago. It's this thing. We have a president that randomly bombs boats in the Western Caribbean because they are allegedly bringing drugs. I don't know that they're bringing drugs or not. I do know that those are
Exactly. We have no
extrajudicial.
evidence. We
Yeah,
have killings that are going on with no
yeah.
evidence for the
With no evidence of that.
justification of it. And we have become so desensitized to death that it doesn't even bother us that people's lives are being taken on a regular basis, even in our own communities. We are so desensitized to it. And so, we go into a certain routine when an individual dies and then we just move on as if,
Then we
and
move
I'm talking
on.
about it in these situations with homicides and abuse and other criminal associations, and we accept this. We've normalized it. It's been entirely too normalized in our community. I often wonder when I'm at the jail or I'm at the penitentiary and I see the children that are being brought in, and I know in my mind that confined individuals have a right to see their children and want to see their children. But I also wonder what effect is this having on them at such a young age, getting them accustomed to being in these prison and jail settings. I don't think it's good for them to be in these settings or to normalize it. It gets so normalized at such an early age with so many Black children to be visiting a loved one who is behind bars.
I mean, I think like with that, I think the issue is there has to be other supports involved, right? It can't just simply be that visit. There has to be other supports involved. And so, but that's what most of these things. And again, you
And that's where the problem, Dr. Alexander, is happening because the
That's
follow-up
that's
with these
that's one
other
of the
things,
problems. But a big problem we have,
what's that?
we've legitimized this system.
of
Oh,
course
because
we have.
we've legitimized it because we are so much a part of the
I
system.
know it,
We
but
You know,
are, yeah.
yeah, but see,
and for many of us, we've
if it,
legitimized it because that's how our livelihood is based on the system.
yeah, but you can
And
see,
that's what makes it additionally problematic. You look at it from our standpoint, Larry, especially from mine doing criminal defense. It's problematic, and the level of punishment that is being given to our people now is past punitive. It's cruel and unusual punishment because the number of years that individuals are receiving, they will never be able to overcome that trauma. The trauma from being sentenced to that, the trauma from being in prison, I don't see a way that they can come back to us in any kind of wholeness, Dr. Alexander, which is what I see is also problematic. And I've really moved to this whole premise because I don't believe that we are inherently bad. I do believe that there are people who are just uneducated or really don't understand the consequences of their actions.
There's
And
people who are born traumatized,
there are people that are born traumatized without a
and,
doubt.
and it and it gets worse from the point
Yeah,
that
it
they
gets
come.
worse. You're right.
Yes.
But what I was getting ready to say is that I've moved now. I'm more on a level of asking for shock treatment for individuals as opposed to long-term incarceration because the overwhelming majority of my caseload, if you sit them down for 90 or 120 days, they won't get into any more trouble.
And
Now
so
you have
what do
some,
you think? What do you think about that? Because that's what is it about that, Gerald, that you think is um is healing or curative?
Effective.
because when they get that shock treatment, and I notice when I deal with
So
them,
define
one,
that. Define the
uh,
shock treatment.
hmm, where they get some type of where they confined for a short period of time, and
And
it's
what do they
not going
get with that confinement?
to.
What comes with that confinement?
It just comes with confinement. It doesn't really come with
No, what come?
counseling.
No, something come with it. Something come with it. What comes with that confinement is they got somewhere to be. They got food.
Oh yeah,
They
they
got
have that. Yeah, they
there.
have food, clothing,
So
and shelter. They have food, clothing,
yes,
and shelter. Um,
yes, they have a
yes,
routine.
they have a routine. They have all of that. They have a routine. They have some discipline.
Yes.
And for
So if
some of
it's
them, they have a
done,
job because they have
yes.
an assignment to do. So yes, you're correct. All of that responsibility or those other forces that they didn't have that does come with that.
Those things that
And for
encourage.
even a lot of them, they have some male role models that they have that they didn't have before. In other inmates that are in there with them and with staffing at the jail.
Which is why which is why you have states saying we're going to take away all of the supports that make that that make rehabilitation possible.
Make
We're
reform
going to take
possible, exactly. And
we're
which
going
they
to take
did.
all of them.
They took the trade
You
skills out
take
of the
that
high
stuff out
school
because
and out of the
yes,
justice centers, you know,
yes.
and the capability of getting college credits. All you exactly correct.
So
You
if you take
exactly
all this
correct.
stuff away, then you know that that is a recipe for recidivism,
Hmm.
right? And so again, we got to think about all of that
And the
stuff
reason why it's
as
a
vital.
recipe for recidivism is because that recidivism is necessary for them to keep that economy going. Because if you ever visit anyone that is in any of these institutions, which are in these small towns, the whole economy of the town is based on the prison.
And so why would we believe that the United States, which was established and predicated upon the human trafficking of black bodies, is anything other than that now?
Oh, that's what they are. They are absolutely that, but we just won't confront that part of it, you know, and
Well,
that goes.
we won't look at it as a continuum. So
We don't look
even
at it
when we
exactly. We don't look at
yes,
it
so
as a
even when we
continuum.
confront it, it's a disconnection, which and we lose so much time reestablishing, to borrow from you all's field, reestablishing the theory of the case. It's the same case.
And we caught up in it once again right now.
And
You know,
so
what we're
yes.
dealing with Trump is the same case, and
So
we
so
busy
check this
trying to
out.
reevaluate it as if it's something brand new.
I was just thinking about this just as we was just talking about, what it looked like when we was growing up. That if this were 1975, my household would be if what Trump is doing right now, if he was the president then, or if this is what Gerald Ford was doing, or whoever was the president in 75, my household, my life would be in shambles. I am a child. My father is a Korean War vet. He was a payroll clerk in the 70s and into the 80s, into the mid 80s when he retired. My mother worked in procurement. She worked over there on Goodfellow, um, purchasing helicopters and airplanes for the Army. So if they'd came through and slashed the federal government's workforce, of which Black folks in general are overrepresented, Black women more specifically, that would have destroyed my family. If they'd have came through there in 75, my parents had 3 kids in college and 2 at home, destroyed. And so this thing is just simply the perpetuation of this thing. It was criminal operation. The only
Sir, let's call it by
But you
let's call
know,
it by its
one
official
thing, Dr.
name. Let's
Alexander,
call it by its official name, the
we
criminal enterprise.
and we could close out on this, Larry, if you want to. But one of the things is that it's a continuation,
it's
but
a
because we
yes,
have, but because we have people who are millionaires and billionaires in the Black community, we believe it's not a continuation.
because we think because they get the money that somehow is trickling down and it ain't. And
Exactly,
so and that's we're
and we are
caught up
so
watching their lifestyle.
right. That's what I was getting ready to say. You know, they have us. The reason why you have these housewife shows and these other reality shows is to have us distracted on those situations. And the reason why you so much violence is promoted to our people in the music or in our communities. I am trying to shut down these Palestinian gas stations in our community, and they create a lot of havoc in our communities with the advertisement of alcohol, drug paraphernalia, lottery tickets. That's all over our community. When you go into the white community, you don't see that. If you go to a mobile on the move or quick trip, they sell all the same things, but you will see none of that advertisement all over the windows or being advertised in those communities. And it all goes back to organizing the community to fight these things. And it's a continuation, as you indicated, because it is Francis Slade, the white mayor, who allowed for all of that, of those deals, along with Black leadership, to allow for these gas stations to be implemented all throughout our community, which is ridiculous.
Gerald, I just read, and woe is me in this. I just read for the first time E. Franklin Frazier's The Black Bourgeois. I would highly
Woe
recommend.
for you.
Yeah, woe for me. Yeah, I know. I forget you, Pete. That's why I'm the only one that likes you. Uh, uh, and it's not dated at all. And I've coupled that with something that Petey has not read. More than I shouldn't say that because I don't know what that. I mean, there's no telling what he's doing. But I've read Howard French's The Second Emancipation.
I have
Um,
not read it.
and well, I highly recommend it. You have to read it, and I want to talk to you about it afterwards. It is a phenomenal book because but the parallels, they're not blatant, but they're obvious. That we can't depend on the black bourgeois class. They really do believe that they have something to keep, and it's really
You
it's
know, Larry, but you know, we are considered to be part of that.
well, we're not because it's a mindset. It's a
I
mindset
mean,
that
we may not be, but those that we run with are.
all of
And
them are. All of
Right.
them
I'm
but
are.
getting
but
ready to
but
say
But
but
we
it's
run
the
with a
pro
lot of people.
you
but
know
the
you are
other
going
point.
but see it is the proliterate class that we are going to have to rely on. But this black bourgeoisie class, you know, save for some. I don't. They're not going to be. I mean, those are people that are going to come. You know, and you have to watch them because they will turn you in.
But the thing is that all of these things, in terms of the revolutionary mind, these things have already been litigated. And so, so like even referencing E. Franklin Frazier, one of the major takeaways from the book and what he's professing is why thing looks the way it looks right now and why it's even happening. The whole reason why they went through and went roughshod through the federal government is because black wealth is predicated on the federal government. And so you got all these people running around act like they balling. No, nigga, you work for the federal government.
Work
That's who
for
you work for.
right.
Yes. And so even the goofies, X number of the goofies who, had decided that they had gotten to their spaces in, you know, either the federal government or some private entity that makes us money being a vendor to the federal government, who thought that whatever was going on with black folks that caused us in mass to not get whatever we was that we wanted was some internal or some biological defect on our own part, and as a result, roll with the enemy. That's in part of why they are now unemployed or underemployed, because they've been cut off the federal nipple. And that was a part of what his argument was all the way then. Back then when he wrote it, was that those Negroes who were making their ascension through the federal government ranks were separating themselves then and creating the foundation for all of these other uh, organizations and programs and ideologies that create class separations in the black community. That's really what the whole thing is about. Now,
I'm going to ask you
when
all
we get to
one more question, and we're going to
Mhm.
close with this, Gerald. I know you guys got to get on, and I'm going to say this first. I'm going to preface it by this: these are, the individuals that we're talking about are individuals that enslaved, undereducated, killed, uh, performed several illegal medical procedures in terms, I mean, you can never forget that they have sterilized our women and sterilized us. Why do we still suffer them and want to be a part of them?
It's that Stockholm syndrome, I think, of wanting to be close to the oppressor, and it's the situation which is so unique to us in the way that we came to this country. We don't readily have anything else to fall back on. If we had a culture and we directly knew exactly where we came from in Africa and still had contact, we probably would reverse back to that. But we can't even go back to that because we don't know. And we all came here from different tribes and we just had to make it work, which is what we did. We turned our color into a culture.
But everybody that comes here and they second and third generation typically are struggling how they relate with their point of origin. So that has
Not
a
to the level that
structure,
we
but
are, Dr. Alexander. And at least they have some context
they
about that
don't you
culture when they come.
we nah we distort the impact of their generational issues because it it works for our argument and our narrative. We don't have to know where we come from in order to know that this shit here is not good for us by definition. You ain't gotta know that you from first of all, the shit ain't even called what it was called then. So it don't matter. It's and it all got wrecked over it. So the other piece of this thing is we act like that there was not a like experiment going on the continent in the midst of all of this, which made this even possible. And so they have their same disconnects. White folks here are by and large, they really not the white folks who came. They don't even identify with those places in the same way. And so this thing creates its own, it has its own culture. Much of this culture is predicated on whatever we brought to this culture. We know that our cultural impact is disproportionate to our number. We know all of that. We identify with the aggressor because the aggressor is the aggressor and the aggressor has whatever there is to be had. That's it, that's all. If it was any different, the folks who look like us, who are still over there, would not be trying to get here. So if they are there, so why would so if all that literally glitters is gold on the continent, why do we have Africans trying to come to the US when they got Africa and they got who they are? They know where they are, they know their bloodlines. Why are they trying to come? Because that's not the key. But it's convenient for us to say because we don't have and we're looking, and I think it's great that we're looking, but we only really need to look for context and historical value so that we know the process of getting here and we know where we are and we know and we're having emerging ideas about what we have to do in order to continuously, it's like we got to be looking at this as like as a work project, continuous quality improvement.
And
Like we got to be doing,
I don't
but
disagree with any of that you're saying. I do think that context and that understanding is necessary, and
it
especially
is
for me,
absolutely
is
necessary.
necessary to have the fight. You know, like that I need that context to help me have the strength to
You
fight the things that
absolutely
I
need the
need to fight.
context.
And I
I
feel like
agree.
if I didn't have that context, it'd be even more difficult for me to put up and fight the battles that I have to fight.
And I
And,
will.
and my only point in that again is that we had this conversation as if there was no colonization of the they shit is shambles too. That's why we celebrating the brother because he over there doing whatever.
Right.
And so the
The
last about 2 weeks ago was you know was of the Berlin conference. All of that stuff happened.
That is a point that we underscore. We do act as I guess our removal from that, we fantasize with it. We have a fetish with when in fact the colonial powers are still at work over there and they're
Yes,
still getting the bauxite, the iron, the ore, the rubber, and the Chinese are over there now. Another great,
gold, the diamonds,
the diamonds,
the oil.
the oil,
Oil.
and there's still this learned helplessness that is over there in too many countries in Africa. I'm reading the China's second continent right now. What China is doing over there could not be done but for the impotence of the leadership over there. So
It's the leadership that's allowing them to come in and develop and build those highways and those
That too
infrastructures in
was
there.
created.
that's good. So
That
let's, guys, I mean, we're going to wrap up, gentlemen. One thing that we all should do as well, let me say this. First of all, I want to give a nod to the incredible life led by my father-in-law, Grover Johnson. He passed away a couple weeks ago at 98 years old. Lifelong Omega. He was the president of the St. Louis alumni chapter, pledged at Stowe College back in the 1940s, and incredible educator, was known
what's
as,
that chapter, Larry?
man, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I will get that for you. But it was I mean, just a phenomenal man. He was a North Star for many of us, introduced me to the game of golf and a whole lot of other things, anniversary club and so forth. So he will be celebrated for the rest of my life, and I know the rest of my children's life. So I just want to say that. But before we go, I'd like to get one thing from each of you all that we need to do or attempt to do during this week of Thanksgiving.
We
Hmm.
have to, and really kind of again in the interest of this conversation, um, when we are giving thanks, um, we at one and the same time have to give thanks for that ancestral wisdom that that enlivens us, that that gives us, that force and ability to go through and get through. Um, and at the same time, we gotta ask, um, we gotta ask for more. We gotta ask for more. We gotta ask for more wisdom and insight, um, so that we could do what Attorney was just saying. We have to be able to benefit from what was so that we can better contextualize what is.
Awesome. Attorney Kwame Jerry L. T. Christmas, please give me one thing to work on this week.
Coming together. We have to actually let's actually plan on coming together next week, as families, because so many families do not come together anymore and sit down and eat at the table. You'd be surprised at how many young people I've come in contact with that they don't regularly sit down and eat dinner together. They don't break bread together, and they haven't done it for generations. It's not just that they don't do it in their generation, their parents didn't do it in their generation, their grandparents did not do it. It has lost its art of bringing us together. They have to go all the way back to their great grandparents that they didn't even know or heard about having dinners at their house. So I really want us to come together and let's have a meal together so we can discuss some of these issues and try to work through some of this trauma. But it starts with us all first being together. That's why Umoja is the first principle of Kwanzaa, unity. Because without unity, we can't even get to the rest of the issues and the problems that we have to address. So let's focus from here to the end of this year to next year in maintaining unity.
I will take both of those to heart. And the other thing I would just add is let's get uncomfortable
Yes.
and let's get comfortable in the uncomfortable aspect of it.
So
Because
the truth of the matter, and I hate to interrupt you, but just quickly, we only grow in the chaos. We don't grow in the comfort. You only grow in the chaos.
Okay, Gerald. Well, thank you for giving us two things. And that, but that's what that but get used to it because
Yeah.
that's where we are. And for Dr. Alexander mentioned before in the green room that he was about to go and test his body, was about to go and stress his body.
Hmm.
Now, many of you all don't know that he mentioned a procedure he had he had a knee replacement, stepping so hard with the newts, the man that ran his knee out. But but
Twirling and shimmying.
the shimmying, this man didn't shimmy the man didn't shimmy his kneecap off. But that's what we have to do, folks. It's there, and and once we get there, that level of distress, the line is increased. What's uncomfortable today will be routine tomorrow. What's uncomfortable tomorrow will be routine the day afterwards, and you build on it. All of this is a muscle. Your habits are muscles. I've been fasting lately, and I can tell you it is number one, it takes you to a level of connecting with the ancestors. It takes you
Hmm.
to a level of community that we all need to get back to, but get uncomfortable. And you know the areas in which you need to be uncomfortable in. And if it's the Lord's will, we'll see you all, really soon. Want you all to have a safe Thanksgiving Day, and let's take some time off and come back stronger. This is, another thing that Dr. Alexander mentioned was he mentioned time. He mentioned time, eons. And we have a very bad relationship or bad understanding of how time operates. And that this little era that we in is just that. And we've got to fight our way through it. But this is, and this is our time, and we've got to deal and come to have a better understanding of what has to, of really our time in the scheme of time, and so forth. So we that's a whole other show. I see you nodding your head, Dr. Alexander. I mean, that's a whole nother show that we need to have. So we thank you guys, and we look forward to being in community with you all soon. And you all have a very, very safe and prosperous break.